Hey everybody, how you doing? This is Kinesiology 114. Presentation is regarding center of gravity and base. So with center of gravity, if we were to take the human body and split it in half, right and left, split it in half, front and back, split it in half, top and bottom, roughly, right, by weight, where those lines all intersect, that would be just about where the center of gravity is. And that's roughly middle of the body, right around where the belly button is, right? Maybe a little bit higher, a little bit lower, depending on the person. And think of it like a tennis ball kind of floating around in the middle of a human form. And it moves, right? It's not static. I mean, because we move around as human beings, and so as a result, the COG will move around. So I often describe it as like a tennis ball, right? And it's like a tennis ball that moves around in the human body, and you can use that to your advantage or somebody else's disadvantage, as you'll see. So let's talk a little bit more about this. If we look at COG, represented by the little ball in the middle there, that tennis ball, and you look at this, right? You kind of know this intuitively as an athlete. If you have a wide base with a lower center of gravity, you're going to be pretty darn stable. You know that you're going to be very stable here. And over here, if you look like this paper towel roll with a tennis ball in the middle of it, or your center of gravity in the middle of it, you now know you have a narrower base and a higher center of gravity. And of the two, the one on the right is more inherently unstable, and the one to the left is definitely more stable. We just know that. This will change though. It depends on the body position, depends on the position of the item we're talking about. And COG is something that's very dynamic and something that is applicable, like I said, to you as an athlete, but also applicable to you evaluating your opponent as well, to see when they're out of position, etc. And you can kind of see when they're one-on-one. I will say this is a side note, like when you get into combative sports and you start talking like wrestling, when two wrestlers are standing on the mat and they're getting ready to wrestle, one person has a COG, the other has their own COG. As soon as they lock up, hand behind the head, hand around the arm, and the other arm around the other arm, and they start to like tug and pull and they're starting to wrestle, they have a shared center of gravity between them, and it becomes a more dynamic environment with both individuals trying to impart their force on the other one's COG, or in essence, the shared center of gravity between them. Very similar to when you pick up a bar and you go to do power cleans. As soon as you grab that bar becomes part of your COG. So you have to be able to hoist a weight very explosively and very, very quickly, but with great technique, so your bar stays tight to your own center of gravity, so you don't end up having a counter movement. And we'll talk a ton about center of gravity in this class. Now I want to take a look at this, right? If you look at your COG over the base, very stable. Your cylinder, as soon as we take it and tip it and turn it over, the COG actually moves outside of the base of support. And if we were to take the cylinder and tip it further and further and further, this would actually fall further and further and further. And you'll see this in class. We're going to do a partner exercise where one person holds the other. It's kind of like a trust fall or a trust catch, if you will. And one person will hold the other. And we'll talk about positioning of center of gravity over a stable base, over on ball of the foot position, and on one foot, also lateral. And so you'll kind of get this concept a little bit more when we apply it out in the lab section where we're out on the floor doing speed agility work. But this is kind of key though, because a person who runs around with their COG over their base is very stable, and there's a relationship between instability and acceleration. 100%. If you've ever watched little kids, playing sports and they run around like little sticks in the mud straight up and down, they are not utilizing their COG over their base to their advantage. As you start to watch athletes develop, you see them kind of go through this learning curve and this comfort cycle of getting accustomed to being unstable. It can be a little bit freaky at first, right? Because you feel like you're going to wipe out. And that's part of what we're doing with some of these drills in class, is to get you very comfortable with this environment and be able to feel comfortable in an unstable environment, but be able to be comfortable, but also harness that instability and utilize this as an acceleration tool. And that is one of the huge things that we're after in this class. So if we go ahead and fire this video up to the right, you have a two-footed base going to a single-footed base, and then you look at this high knee position, which is heel recovery. Think about our running technique drills, what we're doing in running technique. I'm asking you to go from a stable environment to a more unstable environment with a single contact point, and then push up nice and high through the ball of the foot, because we don't do anything from the arch backwards. And that's going to put you in a more unstable environment because of two reasons. One of which is, as soon as you go up and through the big toe, your COG raises, and then as soon as you go up and through the big toe, your contact patch gets smaller and smaller and smaller. The other part of this is the toe up position creates more potential energy, like we've talked about. But it's the big thing that this sets the foundation for being able to be more comfortable in an unstable environment. Let's go ahead and run it. Not toe down, toe up. And in that toe up position, it popped up on the ball of the foot there. We'll do it again. Down, up, up we go through the big toe. Notice the elevation change by bringing the heel up off the floor. We extended the knee a little bit more. The hip flexor is activated and it brought the knee up and the lower limb up. That allows you to create more potential energy, as we talked about in another presentation. But the big thing we're after here is that tennis ball that's in the middle of my body now moved up a couple inches away from the floor. I have become more unstable. And if I utilize that correctly, that will allow me to create more acceleration, because a couple things are going on. I'm delivering force into the ground, into a smaller contact patch, and we know from a previous presentation that equates to more power. I'll be able to spend less time on the ground, which means I'm more powerful. And then the other part of this is my center of gravity. This is not me, by the way. My center of gravity in an aggressive start position is actually nowhere near my base over here. It's actually out in front. So I'm left with, and you'll feel this in one of the drills that we do, you're left with two options. You either have to accelerate out after your COG by delivering force down to the blocks and then down and into the ground as you take off, or you fall on your nose. Take your pick. Most people would opt to accelerate after their COG, but there is a learning curve and a comfort component to this. You have to get accustomed and comfortable to this. And some of the drills that we're going to do, like when we do change of direction drills, and I ask you to lay out, I completely lay out on the floor. By design, that is designed, to force you to reconcile this and be able to tighten this up in a two-axis of rotation environment, which you'll see. But that's one of the things I'm kind of after with those drills, is I want you to feel unstable, and I want you to push the envelope, and I want you to go beyond what you're comfortable with, because I want you to harness this thing as much as possible and be able to accelerate. So there's a comfort component, and you guys are going to go through this and you're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable with some of the drills that we do, because it's going to take you right outside of your base of support, right? And when you're coaching, for some of you who want to go into the coaching aspect, you have to progress your athletes correctly and properly, right? You have to kind of win over their bodies and get them to the point where they go through the learning curve, and the drills themselves introduce in technique while you're teaching them how to be more powerful, more explosive, and the mechanics to be able to change direction. But it's like I said in a previous presentation, we're going to show you what you can do, and then we're going to show you how much more you can actually do. And that comes from you as an athlete getting outside of your comfort zone. And that'll come. I do urge people, like when I work with them, to go through the learning curve. And then what you'll find is, as you get faster and faster and faster, and you try to push that envelope ever so slightly, maybe a little bit further, you might wipe out. Your feet might slip out from underneath you as you learn how to have the proper sequencing of how to pivot and push, how low do you need to be? Do you have to have one hand on the ground? Do you have to have two to have a two-axis of rotation turn? You know, those are the kind of things that you are going to go through the learning curve in this class, but it requires you as an athlete to be proactively involved with this coaching dynamic. Otherwise, you're not teaching yourself anything. You're just teaching yourself how to be slow. So I need you to teach yourself how to be fast and explosive. And the big thing is, now you have a new point of reference, right? So now when you get on a basketball court or get onto the field of play, you'll have more confidence going after a play or attempting to get to the point of contact, knowing that you can get there, right? Because you've learned how to do that in a practice environment. And that's really what we try to do in a practice environment, is teach you drills that allow you to learn what it is you can do. So when you get onto the field of play, you never have to think about that, because if you start thinking, you're slowing down. That's not what we want. I want you to be able to be fast, poppy, and explosive and not have to think about your movements. All right, guys, signing off from this one. Catch you later.